What up, everyone? Welcome back to Blade Bias. Today we're going to talk about the Delta FifT, a balisong that by all means I shouldn't like, and yet I still do. This balisong is the predecessor to one of my favorite balisongs of all time, the FifT, and I will do, if you guys want me to, a comparison video between the two, kind of covering how far Dalen has come. Because regardless of how you feel about the face jimping, and I know some people are still mad about that, this is ultimately the successor to the FifT. So if you want to see how far he's come, let me know. I'll make a video on specifically that. But for right now, we're going to talk about why I like this thing. Because this is a balisong, by all accounts, I shouldn't enjoy. I shouldn't like this. It goes against all of my preferences. And why it serves as kind of a lesson that preferences are not a hard and fast rule. There is an exception to every rule at the end of the day. So, let's go over maybe why I shouldn't like the FifT. Starting off, it's kind of heavy and bulky, and I'm not usually someone who enjoys heavier knives nowadays. The heaviest thing that I own is the Arctic, 4.6 ounces, and a little heavy for my taste, but I'm fairly used to it. The balisong that I would say feels the heaviest in my collection is the, well, we'll get to that in a future video, but the Nemesis. The Nemesis, I believe, is 4.3 ounces. It just feels kind of heavy and bulky sometimes. Not that I don't enjoy that, but I find myself reaching for a lighter experience most of the time. Just for a more effortless flipping experience, you know, a little bit more fun and enjoyable. I don't know. I also don't really prefer bearings, which this runs on. And I realized that at Blade Show when I tried the Telestro Z and the Telestro Z bushing model back to back. As someone who always really liked the Telestro and thought that I was going to buy one day, trying the bushing model and then trying the bearing model right after made me realize that I kind of find bearings just a bit too fast and uncontrollable. Which is not to say they're bad. Of course, there are a lot of people who think that bearings are objectively bad, and they are just wrong because, you know, everyone has their preferences, and just because something isn't to your preference doesn't mean you should say that it's like the worst thing ever and then shun any knife that uses the pivot system. In fact, I have a balisong that I really like that uses bearings. The Cycloid. Zippy has been on the bearing train for a long time now with the Cycloid V1, the Cycloid V2, the Zipper, etc. But this runs on bearings. It's heavy, bulky. And finally, it's got a pretty decent handle bias to it, which I'm usually someone who prefers more neutral or even slightly blade bias balisongs. Which is not to say a little bit of handle bias doesn't help sometimes, which, you know, obviously I have balisongs in my collection that are handle biased, that I still enjoy, but they fan well, you know. At the end of the day, I enjoy fanning, and the FifT doesn't really fan the best. Despite all of that, bulky bearings, doesn't fan the best, too handle biased, I still find myself intrigued by this thing, and every time I flip it, I'm charmed. It wins me over in such a weird way, even though on paper it really shouldn't. And it goes to show you just how important it is to maybe not judge something on paper and give it a shot in real life. Because on paper, I wouldn't like this thing. I would dismiss it. And yet when I flip it in person, I don't know, I like it. I like it a lot. To the point where I would buy one, not just for collection purposes, but to genuinely flip sometimes. I'm not saying it would be my main flipper, but flipping it sometimes would be pretty fun. Now, for those of you who are probably trying to explain away my enjoyment of this thing as, oh, you're just shilling for Machinewise, or, like, you just love the FifT, and you just, like, the history is blinding you, man. I can tell you that that's not the case, because back in the day when I first tried one of these at Blade Show, Will's Delta FifT, I still really enjoyed it. And those were in the days where Ty was the bigger Machinewise shill than I was. I didn't own a single one of Dalen's products. That was before the time of me getting my Prisma. And I was on the NRB train. I had the Vortex. I was going to get the Nemesis real soon. I had the pre-order for that. So I'm not blinded here by Machinewise nostalgia. I'm not blinded by my love for Machinewise. I liked this thing before I really started paying a lot of attention to Machinewise, quite honestly. which isn't exactly true. I was obviously, like, was aware of him. The Marin Light, Ty had it, and it was great. But up until this point, I hadn't even tried one. Like, Ty had lost the Marin Light by that point, so, you know, I wasn't, like... you know, all that to say, I'm not blinded by my love for Machinewise when I say that I like this thing. This thing is just genuinely interesting, apart from the fact that it has the bearing and bushing hybrid system that I mentioned in the unboxing video. Ted also sent me a picture of how the washers came out of this thing when he got it modded, and they were broken. Physically broken in half, and it still had, like, solid tolerances and was holding up just fine. Which, for a balisong that Dalen created 3 years ago at this point, I want to say. He created these in 2020, right? Maybe 2021, I don't know. Like, for a balisong that he made that long ago, to hold up with broken washers like that, that's kind of astounding. But the FifT also serves as a reminder that our preferences aren't exactly hard and fast. There's always an exception to those preferences, and it's something that Pyro goes over in one of his Ramble videos. If you look up the one that has variety in the title, I don't know the title off the top of my head, but it's like variety is the spice of life or something. Variety is important, something like that. You can find it on his channel, I'm sure. He goes over why sticking to a specific preference can kind of screw you over sometimes, and you can miss out on some pretty important things. And the FifT just reminds me of that. You have all the people who collect sometimes maybe only Machinewise, or only Squid Industries, or only handle bias knives, only titanium knives. And they're missing out on so many things that the balisong community has to offer. Granted, if that's your preference and that's what you prefer, I'm not going to judge you. But sometimes it's like, break away from your preferences a little bit and try something new, you know? You might just find your new favorite balisong. Or, at the very least, you'll have a more well-rounded collection, which will allow you to enjoy the differences and appreciate the differences in balisongs, you know, in the future. But all of that extremely long, what is blood waffling about to say, I like the FifT, even though I really shouldn't. Yeah, I mean, that's the takeaway. I like the FifT even though I really shouldn't. It flips nice. It hugs your fingers on rollovers. Chaplains are nice. It carries a bit too much momentum for my taste, like when you do the underhand full twirl and then hit yourself in the knee with it. Like when you do the underhand full twirl, stopping it and going back and forth is like kind of rough. Carries a lot of momentum. But this thing's just fun. The bearings don't detract from it too much for me because the bearings, like, it's still a very frictionless swing, but, like, it's not so frictionless to the point where it feels uncontrollable like some bearings have for me in the past. It's big, but you get a lot of control, even if it is a bit thin. I think the thinness kind of helps it because even though it is big, it doesn't feel, like, absolutely massive. And I don't know, it's just fun. This is a balisong I would definitely consider owning in the future for both collection and flipping sake, like I mentioned earlier. And I'm extremely happy that I got the chance to try it. So, that's the FifT. Let me know if you want me to compare it to the SliftT or the Prisma or any of Machinewise's other products. But until then, thank you, Ted, for sending it out, as usual. And I will see you all in the next one. Go try some stuff that you might not prefer. Maybe you'll discover that your preferences aren't as closed in as you thought they were. Peace.